Park Daeho stood at his cabin's wooden porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The mountain air was crisp and clean, just the way he liked it. After 15 years in the Special Forces, this peaceful life as a mountain rescue specialist was exactly what he needed. He lifted his coffee mug to his lips, but stopped halfway. Something wasn't right. The birds had gone quiet. Even the usual evening wind seemed to hold its breath. That's when he heard it, a high-pitched whine, unlike anything he'd heard before. Not a plane, not a helicopter, something else. Daeho placed his mug on the porch railing and grabbed his binoculars. The sound grew louder, coming from somewhere above the clouds. He scanned the darkening sky, moving the binoculars slowly from left to right. There, he whispered to himself. A bright light broke through the clouds. At first, he thought it was a meteor, but meteors didn't change direction. This object zigzagged across the sky, leaving a trail of blue fire behind it. Something was chasing it. 3 smaller lights, shooting what looked like bright red streaks toward the first object. The larger light took a hit and started to fall. Its glow changed from bright white to angry red as it spun toward the earth. Daeho quickly calculated its path. It would crash somewhere in the dense forest about 2 kilometers east of his cabin. When the object disappeared behind the tree line, the ground shook. A flash of light lit up the forest, followed by the sound of breaking trees. The 3 chasing lights circled the area once, then shot straight up into the sky until they vanished. Daeho didn't waste time. He went inside and grabbed his rescue pack, the same one he used when helping lost hikers. He checked its contents: first aid kit, rope, flashlight, water, emergency blanket, and his old service pistol. In his line of work, you never knew when you might meet an angry bear. He also grabbed his radio, but when he tried to call the local rescue center, he got nothing but static. Strange. The radio had worked perfectly that morning. Something's blocking the signal, he said to himself, frowning. One more reason to be careful. The sun had almost set when Daeho started walking toward the crash site. He moved quietly through the forest, just like he'd been trained. Old habits died hard. The fading light filtered through the trees, creating long shadows that seemed to reach for him like dark fingers. The closer he got to the crash site, the stranger things became. His flashlight flickered on and off. His phone screen went crazy, showing random numbers and letters before dying completely. The air felt different too, heavy and charged, like just before a lightning storm. After 30 minutes of careful walking, he smelled it, burning metal and something else, something that reminded him of mint and gasoline mixed together. Through the trees ahead, he saw an odd blue-green glow. Daeho crouched behind a large rock and watched. The crash had carved a long path through the forest, knocking down trees like they were matchsticks. At the end of this path lay the source of the strange light. A ship, but not like any ship he'd ever seen. It was about the size of a small bus, but shaped like an arrowhead. Its surface looked like polished silver, except where it was blackened from the crash. Blue-green light leaked from several cracks in its hull, creating weird patterns on the surrounding trees. The smart thing would be to turn back, call the authorities, let them handle whatever this was. But something caught his eye. A movement near what looked like a broken window in the ship's side. Someone was in there, and they were moving. 15 years of Special Forces training told him to be cautious. 5 years of mountain rescue work told him someone might need help. As he stood there, deciding, he heard a weak sound from the ship, a groan of pain that sounded almost human. That made the decision for him. Daeho had sworn an oath to help people in need, and he wasn't about to break it now, even if this person might not be human at all. He took a deep breath, checked his pistol, and started moving toward the crashed ship. The blue-green light grew stronger with each step, making the forest look like an underwater scene from a dream or a nightmare. He just hoped he wasn't making the biggest mistake of his life. As Daeho approached the crashed ship, the blue-green light pulsed like a heartbeat. His boots crunched on strange, glittering pieces of metal scattered across the ground. The air smelled sharp and metallic, making his nose tingle. He reached the broken window he'd spotted earlier. The opening was jagged but large enough for him to see inside. What he saw made him freeze. In the dim light, he could make out a figure strapped to what looked like a pilot's seat. But this was no human pilot. The being wore some kind of sleek combat suit that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. Its helmet was cracked, revealing glimpses of pale blue skin underneath. Another groan of pain came from inside. The figure moved slightly, and something silvery dripped from a tear in the suit. Blood, Daho realized. The alien was bleeding. I must be dreaming, he whispered to himself. But the cold night air and the sharp edges of the broken ship felt too real to be a dream. Making his decision, Daho searched for a way in. He found what looked like a door panel on the side of the ship. When he touched it, the panel sparked and slid open with a hiss, as if it still had some power. Inside, the ship was a mess of twisted metal and broken screens. Some still flickered weakly, showing symbols he didn't understand. The alien pilot hung limply in their seat, held in place by straps that glowed faintly. Daho moved closer, his medical training taking over. He needed to check for injuries, but he had no idea how this being's body worked. Would touching them make things worse? Would they attack him when they woke up? The helmet turned slightly toward him. Through the crack, he saw large, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to glow from within. They were a deep purple color, with no whites like human eyes. I'm here to help, Daho said clearly, holding up his empty hands. He didn't know if the alien could understand him, but he hoped his tone would show he meant no harm. The alien tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. Their hand moved to a spot on their chest piece, pressing something. Suddenly, a soft voice came from the suit itself. System damaged. Emergency. Protocols. Failing. The voice spoke in Korean, but it sounded artificial, like a computer. Daho realized it must be some kind of translator. You're hurt, he said. Let me help you. The alien's eyes focused on him for a moment before closing. Their head slumped forward. Looking closer, Daho could see several cuts in the combat suit where the silvery blood was leaking out. The suit itself seemed to be trying to seal these cuts, but it was damaged and working poorly. He pulled out his first aid kit, though he wasn't sure how much good human medical supplies would do. The bleeding had to be stopped first. He took out some gauze pads and began carefully pressing them against the largest cuts. To his surprise, the alien's blood didn't soak through the gauze like human blood would. Instead, it seemed to form small, shining beads that he could carefully wipe away. The skin underneath was indeed light blue, with a slight pattern that reminded him of marble. As he worked, Daho talked quietly, more to calm himself than for the unconscious alien. I'm going to get you out of here, he said. My cabin isn't far. It's not much, but it's safer than staying in this wreck. He found the release for the glowing straps and carefully supported the alien's weight as they came free. The beam was surprisingly light, maybe 40 kilos at most. The combat suit was warm to the touch and seemed to adjust itself as he moved them. Getting them out of the ship was tricky, but Daho managed it without causing any more injuries. As he carried the alien through the dark forest, he couldn't help but laugh at how strange his life had become. I've rescued lost hikers, injured climbers, and even a stranded film crew once, he told his unconscious passenger. But this is definitely a first. The alien remained still in his arms, but their suit continued to give off a faint warmth. Daho walked carefully, but quickly. He didn't know if those lights he'd seen in the sky would come back, but he didn't want to be out in the open if they did. Behind them, the crashed ship's glow began to fade, leaving only the moonlight to guide their way through the forest. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted, a normal sound that felt strangely comforting on this most abnormal night. The first rays of morning sunlight were streaming through the cabin windows when the alien warrior finally stirred. Daho, who had been dozing in his old armchair nearby, instantly became alert. He had laid the alien on his bed, using clean sheets and keeping the combat suit on since he didn't know if removing it might cause harm. Through the night, he had watched as the suit seemed to work on healing its wearer, small lights moving across its surface like tiny stars. The alien's eyes opened suddenly. Those strange, purple glowing eyes. They darted around the room, taking in every detail. Then, with surprising speed, the alien tried to sit up. "Easy there," Daho said, staying in his chair to appear less threatening. "You're safe." The alien's hand went to their chest piece again. This time, when they spoke, the translator worked better than before. "Where am I?" The artificial voice came from the suit, speaking Korean. The tone was female, but with an odd echo to it. "My cabin," Daho answered. "I brought you here after the crash. You were hurt." The alien warrior looked at him for a long moment. "You helped me." She sounded confused, maybe even a little offended. "Yes. I'm a rescue worker. It's what I do." The alien tried to stand but swayed slightly. Daho started to move to help her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I am Han Neri, Scout Commander of the Stellar Guard," she said stiffly. "I do not require assistance from—" She paused, seeming to search for the right word. "From your kind." Daho couldn't help but smile a little. "Well, Scout Commander Han Neri, your kind was bleeding silver blood a few hours ago. My kind helped stop that bleeding." Neri touched one of the gauze pads he had placed on her suit. Her purple eyes narrowed. "This is primitive medical technology." "It worked, didn't it?" She didn't answer, but looked around the cabin again. Her gaze stopped on his old Special Forces photo on the wall. "You are a warrior." "I was," Daho said. "Now I just help people who get lost or hurt in these mountains." Neri took a few careful steps, testing her balance. The suit hummed softly as she moved. "My ship's distress beacon, it was damaged in the attack. Those lights that were chasing you." She nodded. "Cadam mercenaries." She stopped suddenly, giving him a sharp look. "I should not be telling you this. Your species is not cleared for contact." Daho leaned back in his chair. "Bit late for that, isn't it?" Neri's hand moved to what Daho guessed was a weapon on her hip, but found nothing. He had carefully placed her weapons on a high shelf, visible, but out of reach. "Looking for this?" he asked, pointing to the shelf. "Don't worry. They're safe. You can have them back when you're fully healed, and I'm sure you won't shoot me. You dare to disarm a Stellar Guard commander." Her voice was angry, but Daho could hear something else in it, surprise, maybe even a hint of respect. "Yes," he said simply, "because right now you're not a commander. You're my patient." Neri stared at him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are either very brave or very foolish." "I get that a lot," Daho said. He stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen area. "Are you hungry? Can you eat human food?" "My suit provides all necessary nutrients," Neri said, but she watched with interest as he started making breakfast. "That's not what I asked," Daho said, cracking eggs into a pan. "I asked if you can eat human food." Neri was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she finally said. "Our species are compatible in that way. But I should not." "Because we're primitive?" Daho asked, adding some vegetables to the eggs. "Too primitive to help you when you were hurt. Too primitive to give you food when you're hungry." Neri didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. Her purple eyes watched him cook, and Daho could almost see her pride battling with her curiosity. The smell of cooking food filled the small cabin. Outside, birds had started their morning songs, normal sounds that seemed strange against the very abnormal situation inside. Finally, Neri spoke again. "Perhaps I could analyze your food preparation methods for research purposes." Daho smiled as he put the eggs on 2 plates. "Of course, For research, Neri finished the last bite of eggs on her plate. She had removed the lower part of her helmet to eat, revealing delicate blue features that looked almost human, except for the slight shimmer to her skin. Your food preparation was acceptable, she said, but Daeho noticed she had eaten everything. He was about to reply when her suit made a sharp beeping sound. Neri's expression changed instantly from relaxed to alert. No, she whispered, pressing several spots on her suit's arm panel. A small screen appeared, showing what looked like a map. What's wrong? Daeho asked, moving to look at the screen. They're coming. Neri's voice was hard. Macadam mercenaries. They've tracked my suit's energy signature. Daeho felt his old combat instincts kick in. How many? 4 hunters, elite warriors with advanced weapons. She looked at him. You must leave. This is not your fight. This is my home, Daeho said firmly. And you're not fully healed yet. Neri stood up, moving better than before, but still not at full strength. You don't understand. Their weapons can turn this cabin to ash in seconds. They have tracking devices that can see through walls. And they don't know these mountains, Daeho interrupted. They don't know where the caves are, or how to use the terrain. But I do. You would fight? Neri asked, studying his face. Against enemies with technology far beyond yours. Daeho walked to a locked cabinet near his bed. He opened it, revealing his old military gear. Technology isn't everything in a fight. Sometimes knowing the land is better than having the best weapons. He started pulling out equipment, a camouflage suit, night vision goggles, his old rifle, and several other items. Neri watched him with growing interest. In the special forces, he explained as he worked, we sometimes had to fight enemies with better weapons. We learned to use the environment as our weapon. How long do we have? He asked. Neri checked her screen again. They will reach this area in 6 hours. Their ships are in orbit, waiting for darkness to land. Daeho nodded. Good, that gives us time to prepare. He spread a paper map on the table. Show me where they're likely to land. Neri looked surprised at the paper map, but pointed to several clear areas. They will need spaces at least this big for their dropships. These 3 spots, Daeho said, marking the map. They're the only flat areas big enough, and they all have something in common. What? They're all overlooked by higher ground. He smiled, perfect for setting traps. Neri's purple eyes narrowed. What kind of traps can you set with primitive weapons against energy shields and plasma rifles? Instead of answering, Daeho walked to his storage room and came back with several items. Strong rope, metal wire, some small gas canisters, and other simple tools. Sometimes the oldest tricks work best, he said, even against advanced technology. The mountains themselves will be our best weapon. He saw doubt in Neri's face, but also curiosity. Your confidence is interesting, but these hunters have killed many warriors more advanced than you. Did those warriors know the land? Did they know how to make the environment fight for them? Daeho checked his rifle, making sure it was clean. You don't need energy weapons to win a fight. You need knowledge, preparation, and the willingness to use what you have. Neri was quiet for a moment, then walked to the shelf where her weapons were stored. She picked up what looked like a small silver gun. Then perhaps, she said slowly, we should combine your knowledge of the land with my knowledge of their tactics. Daeho smiled. Now you're thinking like a guerrilla fighter. A what? Someone who uses the environment and surprise to defeat a stronger enemy. He pointed to different spots on the map. Let me show you what we can do with these mountains. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the trees. In 6 hours, those shadows would hide deadly traps, and these peaceful mountains would become a battlefield. But for now, a human warrior and an alien commander bent over a paper map, planning how to defeat enemies who thought technology alone made them superior. Sometimes, Daeho thought, The best weapon was the one the enemy didn't expect you to have. The afternoon sun beat down on Daho's back as he finished setting up another trap. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at his work. The rope trap was hidden perfectly under leaves and branches. Anyone stepping there would find themselves suddenly hanging upside down. Neri watched from nearby, her combat suit reflecting the sunlight. "These simple devices," she said, "they seem primitive." "That's what makes them dangerous," Daho replied. "Your people expect energy weapons and high-tech traps. They won't be looking for simple rope and wire." They had spent the last 4 hours preparing the mountain paths. Daho had set up different kinds of traps. Pitfalls covered with branches, tripwires connected to falling logs, and spots where the rocky ground could easily cause a landslide. "Tell me again about their armor," Daho said as they moved to the next location. "Kadam battle suits can stop energy weapons and most physical attacks," Neri explained. "But they need power to work. Without power, they're just heavy metal." Daho nodded, checking his map. "And you said they can't stay in their ships too long because of Earth's magnetic field." "Correct. The field interferes with their systems. They must hunt on foot." Neri paused, watching him work. "You are different from what I expected." "How so?" "Our records say humans are primitive, violent, unable to think beyond simple solutions." She touched one of his traps with her foot. "But these plans, they show understanding of advanced tactical concepts." Daho smiled as he set up another wire. "Maybe your records need updating. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned a few things." He pointed to the valley below them. "See those 3 paths? They all lead to the landing area, but they'll take the middle path." "How do you know?" "Because it looks easiest. The other paths are rocky and steep, but the middle path," he grinned, "that's where we want them." Neri's purple eyes studied the paths, a trap within a trap. "Make them choose the path we want." She nodded slowly. "Perhaps you would have made a good stellar guard commander." "I'm happy being a mountain rescue worker," Daho said. "Usually, I'm helping people avoid these kinds of traps, not setting them." They worked for another hour, setting up their final preparations. The sun was starting to set when they finished, casting long shadows through the trees. Neri checked her suit's screen again. "They will be here soon. Their ships are entering the atmosphere." Daho led them to a hidden spot on high ground. From here, they could see all 3 paths and the landing area. He took out his night vision goggles and rifle. "Your weapon," Neri said, looking at his rifle. "It seems so basic." "Sometimes basic is better," Daho replied. "No energy signature to track, no power cells to fail, just simple mechanics." He showed her how the rifle worked, explaining the principles behind it. To his surprise, Neri seemed genuinely interested. "We have forgotten such things," she said quietly. "In our rush to advance, perhaps we left behind some wisdom." The sky was growing darker. In the distance, they could see 3 small lights descending, the enemy ships. "Remember the plan," Daho said. "Let them think they're hunting us. Let them take the path we want. Don't fight their strength. Use it against them." Neri nodded, checking her energy weapon. "If we survive this," she said, "I will have to reconsider many things about humans." "If we survive this," Daho replied with a smile, "I'll teach you how to make those eggs you liked." That made Neri's serious face soften slightly. "Focus on the battle first, human." The enemy ships were getting closer now. Their lights lit up the mountain like artificial stars. Soon, the hunt would begin. But this time, Daho thought, the hunters might find themselves becoming the hunted. As darkness fell completely, Daho and Neri waited silently in their hiding spot. The mountain seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the battle to begin. In the end, Daho knew it wouldn't be about who had the better technology. It would be about who better understood the ancient art of war. The 3 enemy ships landed exactly where Daho had predicted, Through his night vision goggles, he watched 4 tall figures step out. Their armor glowed with faint red lines, and their helmets had no visible openings, just smooth black surfaces that reflected the moonlight. "Cadam elite hunters," Neri whispered beside him. "They hunt in pairs. 2 will go ahead, 2 will follow." As if following her words, the hunters split into 2 groups. They moved with confidence, scanning the area with devices that looked like small silver boxes. "They're checking for energy signatures," Neri explained. "Looking for my suit's power source." Daho smiled in the darkness. "But they're not looking for rope and wire, are they?" The first pair of hunters took the middle path, just as Daho had planned. Their heavy boots crushed leaves and twigs as they walked, making more noise than they probably realized. "They're used to hunting in space stations and cities," Neri said, "not forests." The first trap was triggered with a snap. A simple tripwire sent a large log swinging down from the trees. The hunters tried to dodge, but their heavy armor made them slow. The log hit one hunter hard, sending him rolling down the slope. His partner raised his weapon, a long rifle that hummed with energy. But he was looking for enemies, not at the ground. The rope trap caught his foot, and suddenly he was hanging upside down, his weapon falling into the darkness below. "Simple tricks," Daho whispered, "but effective." The second pair of hunters rushed forward to help, but they were more cautious now. They used their scanners constantly, looking for more traps. "Time for Phase 2, Daho said. He pulled out a small remote control, something he used for avalanche charges in his rescue work. When he pressed the button, several small explosions went off around the hunters. The explosions weren't meant to hurt them. Instead, they shook loose carefully picked rocks. Suddenly, the hunters found themselves in the middle of a small landslide. Their armor protected them from the rocks, but the helmet of one hunter was knocked loose. In the moonlight, Daho saw a face that looked like it was made of dark metal, with glowing red eyes. "Now, Neri," Daho said. Neri stood up and fired her energy weapon. The blast hit the ground near the hunters, but instead of causing damage, it created a bright flash. The hunters' helmet sensors, adjusted for night vision, were overwhelmed. They staggered, temporarily blinded. Daho took his shot. His rifle bullet hit the exposed neck of the helmetless hunter. The hunter fell, not dead but badly hurt. "Impossible," Neri whispered. "Their armor doesn't cover everything," Daho finished. "No armor ever does." The remaining 2 hunters were retreating now, dragging their injured companion. The fourth was still hanging upside down, trying to cut the rope with a laser tool. "They'll regroup," Neri said. "Come back with a better plan." "Good," Daho replied. "That's exactly what we want them to do." He led Neri through the dark forest to a new position. Behind them, they could hear the hunters calling to each other in a language that sounded like metal striking metal. "You hurt one of them," Neri said as they moved. "No human has ever done that before." "Today is full of firsts," Daho said. He checked his rifle and counted his remaining bullets. "But the real fight hasn't started yet. Now they'll be angry." "And more careful," Neri added. "Yes," Daho agreed. "But being careful means being slow. And in these mountains, being slow can get you killed." They reached their new hiding spot just as the moon went behind some clouds. The mountain became dark and quiet again, waiting for the next phase of the battle. 3 hunters left," Daho said softly. "And they've lost their night vision advantage." Neri looked at him in the darkness. "You planned for that too. In a fight against stronger enemies, you have to take away their strengths one by one." He smiled. "My old commander taught me that. I wonder what he would say if he knew I was using his lessons against alien hunters." "He would say you learned well," Neri replied, and for the first time, there was clear respect in her voice. Thunder rolled across the mountains as storm clouds gathered above. Daho and Neri had moved to a cave high up on the mountainside. From here, they could see the Cadam hunters regrouping below. "The storm will help us," Daho said, checking his rifle. Rain interferes with their sensors. Neri nodded. But it will make your primitive weapon less accurate. That's why we won't be using it much. He pointed to the cave entrance. They'll come to us now. They're too angry to retreat. The first drops of rain began to fall. Lightning flashed, lighting up the mountain for brief seconds. In those flashes, they could see the 3 remaining hunters moving up the path toward their position. They're being more careful now, Neri observed. Moving slower, checking for traps. Yes, Daho smiled, walking right into our biggest trap. The hunters reached a flat area below the cave. They moved in a triangle formation, their weapons ready. Their armor still glowed with red lines, but the glow seemed weaker now. Their power is draining, Neri whispered. Earth's magnetic field and the storm are affecting their suits. Daho pulled out his remote control again. Time to welcome them properly. He pressed the button. This time, explosions went off all around the flat area. The hunters raised their weapons, but there was nothing to shoot at. Instead, water began pouring down the mountainside from hidden pipes Daho had placed earlier, pipes that normally helped prevent forest fires. The sudden rush of water mixed with mud and rocks, creating a small mudslide. The hunters tried to move, but their heavy armor made them slow in the thick mud. Now, Daho shouted. Neri fired her energy weapon at the rocks above the hunters. The blast broke the rocks loose, sending them tumbling down. At the same time, Daho threw several small gas canisters, the kind he used for emergency signals. The gas mixed with the rain, creating a thick, colored smoke. The hunters' sensors couldn't see through it. They fired their weapons blindly, but the energy blasts hit nothing but rocks and trees. Their formation is broken, Neri said. They're separating. Perfect. Daho grabbed his rifle and moved to a different position. You take the left, I'll take the right. One hunter had moved away from the others, trying to get out of the smoke. Daho aimed carefully and fired. The bullet hit the hunter's leg joint, where the armor was weakest. The hunter fell, his weapon dropping into the mud. Neri's energy blast caught another hunter in the chest. His weakened armor couldn't stop the full blast. He stumbled backward and fell over the edge of the path, disappearing into the darkness below. The last hunter was the smartest. He threw down his heavy weapon and pulled out a smaller one, something that looked like a pistol but shot bolts of lightning. Be careful, Neri called out. That's a neural disruptor. The warning came just in time. Daho rolled behind a rock as lightning crackled past him. The hunter was moving up toward the cave now, using the rocks for cover. His suit is almost out of power, Neri said, but that weapon is still deadly. Daho looked up at the storm clouds, then at the hunter's metal armor. An idea formed in his mind. Can you drive him into the open? He asked Neri. Make him stand up. Neri understood immediately. She fired several quick shots, forcing the hunter to move from his cover. The hunter stood, raising his lightning weapon. At that exact moment, real lightning flashed above. The hunter's metal armor acted like a lightning rod. The blast hit him directly, the power overwhelming his suit's failing shields. He fell forward, his armor smoking. The storm raged on, but the battle was over. 3 Kadam elite hunters lay defeated on the mountainside, beaten by simple traps and natural forces. Your plan, Neri said, looking at Daho with new respect. You used everything against them. The mountain, the rain, even the lightning. Nature is the greatest weapon, Daho replied, if you know how to use it. He looked down at the fallen hunters. We should check if they're alive. They're still people, even if they're our enemies. Neri was quiet for a moment. You continue to surprise me, human. You fight with great skill, but show mercy to fallen enemies. That's what makes us human, Daho said simply. Now let's get out of this rain before the real storm hits. Dawn was breaking over the mountains as Daho and Neri checked on the fallen hunters. The storm had passed. leaving behind wet ground and scattered debris from the battle. "They're alive," Neri said, examining the hunters with her suit's medical scanner. "Unconscious, but alive. Their armor protected them from the worst damage." "Good," Daho replied, helping her secure the hunters with some climbing rope. "What will happen to them?" "My people will take them prisoner. The Kadam have broken too many space laws." Neri looked at the rising sun. "My rescue beacon is working better now. Help should arrive soon." But as she spoke, her suit's alarm began beeping again. Her purple eyes widened in surprise. "What's wrong?" Daho asked, recognizing the worry in her face. "Another ship," she said. "A big one. It's their command vessel." She checked her screen. They must have called for backup during the fight. The morning sky suddenly grew dark as a huge ship appeared above them. It was 10 times bigger than the hunters' small vessels, shaped like a giant arrow made of black metal. "They're angry," Neri said. "They've lost face by being defeated by a primitive human." Daho finished with a small smile. "They'll destroy this whole area," Neri said urgently. "They don't care about rules anymore. They want revenge." The big ship's bottom began to glow red. Daho knew what that meant. Weapons powering up. "We need to move," he said, grabbing Neri's arm. "The caves won't protect us from their main weapons," she interrupted. She looked at him with strange sadness. "You should run. This is my fight." "Not happening," Daho said firmly. "There must be a way to stop them." Neri was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "There is one way." She touched her suit's arm panel. "My suit's power core. If it overloads near their ship, it would explode." Daho asked. "Yes, a massive energy burst. It would disable their weapons, maybe their whole ship." She looked at him. "But someone would need to get close enough." Daho understood immediately. "I'll do it." "No," Neri said sharply. "You don't know how to operate the suit. I must do this." "You're still injured," Daho argued. "You can barely walk straight. I can move faster." The ship above them hummed louder. They had only minutes left. "Then we both go," Neri said. She pressed some buttons on her suit. Parts of it began to separate. "I can transfer half the suit to you, enough for protection and jumping power. We'll attack from 2 sides." "They can't track both of us," Daho realized. Working quickly, Neri helped him put on pieces of her suit. The alien technology felt warm and alive against his skin. "Jump when I jump," she instructed. "The suit will help you. Aim for their engine sections." She pointed to spots on the ship's underside. "If we hit both at once, we can overload their whole system." Daho finished. They stood together, looking up at the massive ship. The suit pieces hummed with power. "Ready?" Neri asked. "Wait," Daho said. He looked at her seriously. "If we survive this, you owe me breakfast this time." Neri's face softened into what might have been a smile. "Deal." They jumped together, the suit's power launching them high into the air. The ship's weapons started firing, but they were moving too fast to hit. Daho saw the ground fall away below him. Wind rushed past his face. For a moment, he felt like he was flying. Then something hit him, a glancing shot from the ship's weapons. Pain exploded in his side, but he kept going, aiming for his target. Through the pain, he saw Neri reaching her target. Their eyes met one last time across the distance. Then both power cores overloaded at once. The world turned white with energy. The last thing Daho remembered was falling, the big ship's engines exploding above him, and Neri's voice shouting his name. Then darkness took him, and he knew nothing more. John walked through the dark forest. The trees were tall, and the shadows were long. He could hear strange noises coming from deep in the woods. Twigs snapped under his feet. An owl hooted somewhere in the distance. John wished he had brought a flashlight. It was hard to see the path in the dim moonlight that filtered through the leaves. He walked carefully, not wanting to trip on a root or rock. Suddenly, He heard a loud roar that made him freeze in his tracks. His heart started beating faster. What could have made that terrifying sound? John looked around, trying to see into the shadows between the trees. Another roar echoed through the forest, even closer this time. John began to back away slowly, ready to turn and run. He couldn't tell what direction the roars were coming from. They seemed to surround him. John's mind raced as he tried to think of what to do. Should he make a run for it and hope he could outrun whatever beast was stalking him? Or should he try to hide and hope it passed him by? He didn't have much time to decide. A third roar ripped through the night, so close now that John could feel the hot breath of the creature on the back of his neck. He spun around and found himself face to face with 381 words. I tried to make the scene suspenseful and interesting by describing the sights and sounds of the dark, spooky forest and building up to the mysterious roaring creature that is stalking John. I used simple vocabulary and sentence structure while still painting a vivid picture and conveying a growing sense of danger and urgency as the roars get closer. The ellipsis at the end creates a cliffhanger to draw the reader into wondering what happens next in the story.